My name is Oakley. And at 32 years old, I never imagined my own parents would betray me like this. I still remember the shock when they handed me those mortgage papers with a smile. We bought your sister a house, but we decided you should pay for it. $480,000. When I refused, they actually sued me. The look in their eyes that day in court told me everything I needed to know about family. If you're watching this, drop your location in the comments, give this video a like, and subscribe. If you've ever had family, expect the impossible from you. This story, about how my own parents dragged me to court, changed everything I thought I knew about family. I grew up as the eldest child in our family of 4. From the beginning, there was always this unspoken dynamic that shaped everything. My father, Richard, was a controlling and successful attorney who prided himself on his reputation and connections. He wore custom suits, drove luxury cars, and made sure everyone knew about his latest courtroom victories. My mother, Elizabeth, worked as a financial manager for a large corporation and was absolutely obsessed with appearances. Our home had to be perfect. Our clothes had to be designer, and our achievements had to be impressive enough to brag about at their country club. Then there was my sister Melanie, 4 years younger than me. From the moment she was born, it was clear she held a special place in our family that I never would. She was the princess, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. I remember when she was 8 and broke an expensive vase while playing indoors after being told not to. Instead of consequences, she got ice cream to cheer her up because she felt bad about the accident. When I pointed out the unfairness, I was sent to my room for creating conflict. The financial disparities between us became impossible to ignore as we got older. When I turned 16, my parents informed me that I needed to get a job if I wanted spending money or to save for college. "It builds character," my father said, clapping me on the shoulder. No one handed me anything in life. This speech was delivered while standing in front of his BMW in our 4-bedroom house in the best school district in the state. Meanwhile, Melanie never worked a day during high school. She was too busy with dance and volleyball to hold a job. When college applications came around, I applied for every scholarship I could find, knowing that my savings from bagging groceries and mowing lawns wouldn't come close to covering tuition. I still remember the day I got my financial aid package from State University. I had earned a partial scholarship that would cover about half my expenses. I was ecstatic. "That's nice," my mother said, with a distracted smile when I showed her. "But wouldn't you rather go somewhere more prestigious? Your father and I went to Westridge." "You know, I can't afford Westridge," I explained. "Even with the scholarship, State is going to be tight." My father looked up from his newspaper. "Well, we've always told you that education is an investment in yourself. You'll appreciate it more if you pay for it." 3 months later, Melanie got accepted to Westridge University. At dinner that night, my parents surprised her with the news that they would be covering her full tuition, room and board. "We are so proud of you, honey," my mother gushed. "We want you to focus on your studies and enjoy the college experience, not worry about money." I sat there, fork suspended halfway to my mouth, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. No one noticed when I excused myself early. Despite everything, I thrived in college. I graduated with honors in computer science while working 20 hours a week at the campus IT department. I landed a great entry-level position at a software company and slowly built my career from nothing. I lived with roommates in a cramped apartment, brought lunch to work every day, and meticulously tracked every dollar to pay down my student loans. By the time I was 32, I had finally reached a place of financial stability. After years of saving, I had purchased a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the city and was making steady progress on my remaining student debt. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was proud of what I had accomplished on my own. Melanie's path had been different. After graduating with a liberal arts degree, she had bounced between various jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a year. She met Marcus at 26, and they were married within 6 months. Marcus had a business degree, but seemed perpetually between opportunities or working on startup ideas that never materialized. My parents adored him regardless, calling him ambitious and a free spirit. As adults, I had hoped our relationship might even out. I made efforts to stay connected with my family despite our history. I called regularly, visited on holidays, and tried to build a relationship based on who we were now, rather than our childhood dynamics. Sometimes, it even seemed like it was working. That's why, when I received a text from my parents inviting me for a weekend visit to discuss an exciting investment opportunity, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe they finally saw me as a successful adult. Maybe they were proud of what I had accomplished. Maybe, just maybe, things were changing. I still remember the exact wording of that text. Oakley, we have an exciting investment opportunity to discuss with you. Come for dinner this Saturday at 6. Melanie and Marcus will be here too. We'll be here. Can't wait to see you. If only I had known what they really meant by investment opportunity, I would have blocked their number and moved to another state. That Saturday, I drove the 40 minutes to my parents' suburban home with a cautiously optimistic mindset. The early October weather was beautiful, leaves just beginning to turn, and I had my windows down enjoying the crisp air. I wondered what kind of investment opportunity they wanted to discuss. Maybe they had finally recognized my financial responsibility and wanted my advice on something. The thought made me smile as I pulled into their circular driveway. Their house always made my apartment feel like a closet in comparison. 4,000 square feet of pristine architecture set on a manicured half-acre lot, complete with an in-ground pool and 3-car garage. My father's new Range Rover and my mother's Mercedes were parked outside, along with Melanie's Audi that I knew my parents had helped her purchase last year. There he is. My mother greeted me at the door with her perfect hair and perfect smile, air kissing near my cheeks. She was wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Come in. Everyone's in the living room already. The living room told the story of my parents' priorities. Expensive art on the walls, furniture that was meant to impress rather than comfort, and family photos strategically placed to create the image of the perfect family. I noticed there were 6 recent photos of Melanie and Marcus, and just one of me from my college graduation, almost a decade ago. Melanie jumped up when I entered, rushing over to hug me. Oakley, it's so good to see you. At 28, my sister still had the energetic enthusiasm of a teenager. Marcus nodded from his spot on the couch, not bothering to get up. He was 30 but dressed like a college sophomore in expensive casual wear that I knew he couldn't afford on his own. Son, grab a drink and sit down, my father said, gesturing to the bar cart. We've got exciting news to share. Dinner was a tense affair, at least for me. There was an undercurrent of something strange that I couldn't quite identify. My parents kept exchanging glances, and Melanie seemed unusually bubbly, even for her. Marcus was quieter than normal, studying his plate with great interest whenever the conversation turned to careers or finances. So, I said eventually, what's this investment opportunity you wanted to discuss? My mother clapped her hands together. Let's finish dessert first. Then we'll talk business. After we'd moved back to the living room with coffee, my father disappeared into his office and returned with a folder of documents. My stomach tightened instinctively. Oakley, he began, using his courtroom voice. You know that family is the most important thing in life. I nodded cautiously. And as the successful one in the family right now, you have a responsibility to help when you can. The successful one? That was new. They'd never acknowledged my career accomplishments before. Your sister and Marcus have some exciting news. My mother jumped in, practically bouncing in her seat. Melanie grabbed Marcus's hand, beaming. We're pregnant. 8 weeks along. Congratulations, I said sincerely, surprised but happy for them. That's wonderful news. And, my father continued, sliding the folder across the coffee table to me, we've decided to help them start this new chapter properly. I opened the folder, my confusion growing, as I saw what appeared to be house purchase documents. A beautiful colonial-style home, in an upscale neighborhood, was pictured on the first page. The purchase price made my eyes widen. $480,000. We bought them a house, my mother announced, as if I couldn't read the figure myself. That's very generous of you, I said carefully, wondering why they were showing me this. Here's the exciting part. my father continued, leaning forward. We've decided you should be the one to pay for this mortgage. The room went silent as I tried to process what he'd just said. I must have misheard. I'm sorry. What? The mortgage, my father repeated slowly, as if I were dim. We've put the down payment of $60,000, but we've decided you should cover the monthly payments. It makes perfect sense. How does that make any sense? I asked. Genuine confusion in my voice. My mother jumped in. Well, you're single with a stable job and good income. Melanie is going to be a mother now. And Marcus is between jobs at the moment. Marcus cleared his throat, but said nothing. You have to understand, my father continued. They need a proper family home, especially with a baby coming. You don't need much in that tiny apartment of yours. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was all a joke. No one did. Let me get this straight, I said finally. You want me to pay a mortgage of $420,000 for a house that Melanie and Marcus will live in? Don't say it like that, my mother scolded. It's a family investment. You'd be helping your sister and future niece or nephew. And what do I get out of this investment? I asked. My father frowned. That's a very selfish question, Oakley. Family helps family. Period. Melanie's eyes were welling with tears now. I thought you'd be happy to help us, she said, voice trembling. Don't you want your niece or nephew to grow up in a safe neighborhood with good schools? The manipulation was so obvious, it was almost laughable. Almost. I'm sorry, I said, closing the folder and sliding it back across the table. I can't afford to pay someone else's mortgage. I have my own expenses, my own debt, my own future to plan for. Can't afford it? My father scoffed. With your salary? Don't be ridiculous. My financial situation is not up for debate, I said firmly. And neither is my decision. I won't be paying for this house. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. I never thought my own son would be so selfish, my mother said coldly. After everything we've done for you, my father added. Melanie was full on crying now, and Marcus was patting her hand mechanically, still avoiding eye contact with anyone. I think I should go, I said, standing up. My heart was pounding, and I could feel a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. The anxiety I thought I'd conquered years ago was surging back. If you walk out that door without agreeing to help your sister, my father said in a low, threatening tone, you'll regret it. I looked at each of their faces. My father's barely controlled anger, my mother's cold disappointment, Melanie's tearful manipulation, and Marcus's carefully studied avoidance. Goodbye, I said quietly, and walked out. The week that followed was psychological warfare. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from my family. My parents alternated between guilt trips, threats, and attempts at negotiation. Your sister cried all night because of you. My mother texted Sunday morning. We raised you better than this, came from my father an hour later. By Monday, they had changed tactics. We can discuss a payment plan that works for you, my father offered in a voicemail. Don't throw away your relationship with your family over money. Tuesday brought an email from my mother with links to various mortgage calculators. See? It would only be about $2,600 a month. You spend more than that on your frivolous city lifestyle. My frivolous city lifestyle consisted mainly of working 60-hour weeks, meal prepping on Sundays, and occasionally treating myself to a movie. But they had never bothered to understand my actual life. By Wednesday, they had recruited reinforcements. My Aunt Caroline called, her voice dripping with disappointment. Oakley, honey, your mother is just beside herself. Why won't you help your sister in her time of need? Did Mom explain that she's asking me to pay almost $500,000 for a house I won't live in? I asked. Well, no. But I'm sure there's more to it than that. Family has to stick together. Next came my Uncle Thomas, then my cousin Brittany, then my grandmother. The story seemed to morph with each caller. By the time my grandmother called, she was under the impression that Melanie was destitute, and I had refused to loan her a few $1,000s for a rental deposit. Meanwhile, my friends and coworkers were unanimously telling me to stand my ground. That's insane, said my coworker Jordan when I confided in him over lunch. They can't seriously expect you to pay for someone else's house. My friend Rachel, who I knew from college and who had since become a lawyer, was even more emphatic. Don't give them a dime, Oakley. Don't sign anything. This has red flags all over it. I tried multiple times to calmly explain my position to my parents. I broke down my monthly expenses: rent, utilities, student loan payments, retirement contributions, emergency savings. I explained that taking on a mortgage of that size would financially devastate me. You could move back home and rent out your apartment, my mother suggested, as if that was a reasonable solution for a 32-year-old professional. Or get a roommate, my father added, or a second job. The fact that they expected me to completely restructure my life to fund Melanie's lifestyle upgrade, while neither she nor Marcus would need to make any sacrifices, told me everything I needed to know about their perspective. 10 days after the dinner, I received an email from my father with a DocuSign request. Curious, despite my better judgment, I opened it to find mortgage paperwork for the house, with my name listed as the borrower. My blood ran cold when I saw a signature that looked like mine already on some of the preliminary paperwork. I immediately called Rachel in a panic. They forged my signature, I said, when she answered, my voice shaking. On mortgage, pre-approval documents. Are you serious? Rachel's lawyer voice came through. That's fraud, Oakley. Like actual criminal fraud. What do I do? Forward me everything they've sent you. Every email, every document. Take screenshots of text messages. If they've left voicemails, save those too. Do not delete anything. I spent that evening following Rachel's instructions, compiling a digital paper trail of my parents' increasingly desperate attempts to saddle me with this massive financial burden. This is worse than I thought, Rachel said when I sent her everything. They're not just being manipulative, they're breaking the law. You need to protect yourself. The next morning, a legal courier delivered an envelope to my apartment. Inside was a formal notice informing me that Richard and Elizabeth were suing me for $480,000 for breach of verbal contract regarding real estate investment. I stared at the document in disbelief, my hands shaking so badly I had to set it down on the counter before I dropped it. My own parents were suing me because I refused to pay for a house for my sister. I called Rachel immediately. They're suing me, I said when she answered, my voice hollow with shock. There was a long pause. I was afraid of this, she said finally. Your father's using his legal background to intimidate you. But listen to me, Oakley. This lawsuit is garbage. No court would enforce a verbal contract of this magnitude, especially with no consideration for you. But what do? I can't afford to fight this in court. You won't have to pay anything. I'll represent you pro bono. These are serious allegations, and we need to respond aggressively. Rachel's confidence helped calm me down, but the emotional damage was already done. My own parents had not only tried to manipulate me into financial servitude, but when that failed, they were willing to destroy me legally. As we prepared our response to the lawsuit, Rachel discovered something that made my stomach turn. This wasn't the first time my parents had exploited me financially. During my college years, they had opened several credit cards in my name without my knowledge. Those cards had been paid off years ago, but the fact that they had done it at all revealed a pattern of financial abuse that I had been blind to. That night, I received a call from my father. Against Rachel's advice, I answered it. This is your last chance to drop this nonsense and do the right thing, he said without preamble. The lawsuit can disappear if you just sign the mortgage papers. Dad, what you're doing is wrong. It's illegal. You forged my signature on financial documents. I'm teaching you a lesson about family responsibility, he replied coldly. Something you clearly never learned. I learned plenty about family from you, I said quietly. Just not the lessons you think you were teaching. I hung up and blocked his number. Then did the same for my mother and Melanie. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. All I could do now was wait and try not to fall apart in the meantime. I had never been inside a courtroom before, despite my father's profession. As I sat beside Rachel at the defendant's table, I felt like I was in some bizarre, alternate reality. The wooden benches, the flags flanking the judge's bench, the court reporter typing quietly in the corner. It all seemed like a movie set, rather than a place where my family was trying to legally extort nearly $500,000 from me. The 3 weeks leading up to this moment had been the most stressful of my life. I had lost 10 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence under my eyes from lack of sleep. My performance at work had suffered to the point where my supervisor had called me in for a concerned discussion. I had explained the situation in vague terms, and thankfully he had been understanding. But I knew my professional reputation was at stake too. Judge Anderson was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She reviewed the case file in silence for several minutes, while we all waited. On the plaintiff's side sat my father in his best suit, looking completely in his element. Beside him was my mother, dressed as if for church in a conservative dress and pearls. Their lawyer, someone I recognized as my father's golf buddy Walter, arranged papers with confident efficiency. "All right," Judge Anderson said finally. "Case number 47293. Richard and Elizabeth versus Oakley regarding alleged breach of verbal contract for real estate payment. Let's begin with the plaintiff's argument." Walter stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of a verbal agreement and family obligation. My clients, upstanding members of the community, made a generous arrangement with their son regarding a property investment. They provided the down payment of $60,000, with the clear understanding that their son would cover the mortgage payments going forward." He went on to paint a picture of me as an ungrateful son refusing to help my pregnant sister and her struggling husband. According to him, I had enthusiastically agreed to this arrangement during our family dinner, only to renege on my promise days later. "We have text messages," Walter continued, showing that the defendant was fully aware of the investment opportunity and expressed interest prior to the meeting. The text message in question was the vague invitation I had received, which said nothing about me paying for anyone's mortgage. When it was Rachel's turn, she approached the situation with calm precision. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests entirely on a verbal agreement that never existed. My client was invited to a family dinner under false pretenses and was ambushed with an outrageous demand that he take on a mortgage of $480,000 for a house in which he would not reside, which would not be in his name, and from which he would receive no benefit." She methodically presented the evidence we had gathered: the text messages, emails, and voicemails, showing the escalating pressure from my parents. "Furthermore," Rachel continued, "we have evidence that the plaintiffs attempted to commit fraud by forging my client's signature on preliminary mortgage documents, which we have submitted to the court." Judge Anderson's eyebrows shot up at this, and she flipped through some papers. "Most disturbingly," Rachel concluded, "we have discovered this is not the first instance of financial exploitation. During the defendant's college years, the plaintiffs opened credit cards in his name without his knowledge or consent, a clear case of identity theft." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, but he maintained his composure. When it was his turn to speak, he addressed the judge with the confident charm I had seen him use countless times. "Your Honor, these allegations are ridiculous. We are loving parents who have always supported our children. The documents in question were merely preliminary paperwork that required signatures to move the process forward. As for the credit cards, those were opened with our son's knowledge to help him build credit history during college. This lawsuit is nothing more than a family disagreement that has gotten out of hand." The judge asked several pointed questions to both sides, particularly focusing on the alleged verbal agreement. "Mr. Oakley," she addressed me directly, "did you at any point agree to pay for this mortgage?" "Absolutely not, Your Honor," I replied firmly. I was shocked by the demand and immediately refused. "And did you authorize your parents to sign documents on your behalf?" "No, Your Honor. I never gave them permission to sign anything for me." Just as the judge seemed ready to move on, the courtroom door opened and Melanie walked in. My sister was dressed conservatively, her small baby bump just visible under her loose blouse. The judge allowed her to make a statement. Melanie took the stand, avoiding my eyes completely. "My brother has always been jealous of me," she began, her voice trembling for maximum effect. "When our parents offered to help us buy a house for our growing family, Oakley initially seemed supportive, but then he changed his mind and is now trying to destroy my family's future out of spite." I sat there, stunned by the blatant lies. This was my sister, who I had protected from bullies in school, who I had helped move apartments multiple times, who had called me crying when she and Marcus had their first big fight, and I had talked her through it. Now she was looking at a judge and painting me as a monster who wanted to hurt her baby. In that moment, I nearly broke. The weight of betrayal from my entire family felt crushing. Rachel must have sensed it, because she placed a steadying hand on my arm and whispered, "Almost over. Stay strong." After Melanie's statement, the judge called a 30-minute recess to review all the evidence. Those 30 minutes in the hallway were excruciating. My family huddled on one end, while Rachel and I stayed at the other. Occasionally, my mother would glance over with an expression of hurt betrayal, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Anderson's expression was grave. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented by both parties," she began. "This case centers on whether a verbal contract existed that would obligate the defendant to pay for a mortgage on a property not in his name." She shuffled some papers before continuing. "Based on the evidence presented, I find no credible proof that such an agreement ever existed. Text messages and emails from the plaintiffs themselves show escalating demands rather than references to a previous agreement. Furthermore, the attempted use of the defendant's signature on financial documents without his consent is deeply troubling and potentially criminal." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the judge continued. "This court dismisses the lawsuit in its entirety. The defendant is not legally responsible for the mortgage in question." Relief flooded through me, but the judge wasn't finished. "Additionally," she said, fixing my parents with a stern gaze, "I am referring the matter of the forged signatures to the district attorney's office for investigation. Mr. and Mrs. As an attorney yourself, you should be well aware that forgery on financial documents is a serious offense." My mother gasped audibly, and my father's face went from red to white. "This case is dismissed. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down with a finality that should have felt victorious, but instead left me feeling hollow. As we stood to leave, my father approached, his expression thunderous. "This isn't over," he hissed. "We'll appeal." Rachel stepped between us. "I strongly advise against that. The next judge might not be so lenient about the forgery." Outside the courthouse, as Rachel and I discussed next steps, a terrible clarity came over me. This wasn't just about standing my ground. My family had committed crimes against me, had tried to ruin me financially, had lied about me in court. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a disagreement. This was abuse. "I want to countersue," I said suddenly. Rachel looked at me in surprise. "Are you sure? That would mean more time in court, more stress." "I'm sure," I replied, a new resolve strengthening my voice. "I want compensation for the psychological damage. I want restitution for those unauthorized credit cards from college. And I want a restraining order preventing them from using my personal information ever again." Rachel nodded slowly. "I think that's a wise decision. This wasn't just a family squabble, Oakley. This was financial abuse. Plain and simple." As we walked to her car, Rachel suggested something that would change everything. "Have you considered making your story public? There are so many people out there experiencing financial abuse from family members who don't realize what's happening or feel powerless to stop it." The idea took root immediately. That night, I started a blog detailing my experience, careful to change names and specific details for legal reasons. I expected maybe a few dozen people to read it. Within a week, it had been viewed over 50,000 times and shared across multiple social media platforms. My inbox was flooded with messages from people sharing similar stories of family financial exploitation. Some had co-signed loans they couldn't afford under pressure. Others had had their identities stolen by parents or siblings. Many had been guilt-tripped into supporting able-bodied relatives who refused to work. A nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy and rights contacted me, asking if I would be willing to serve as an ambassador for their new campaign against family financial abuse. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like something positive might come from it. The counter lawsuit was filed the following week. Rachel had helped me craft a comprehensive case, detailing not just the recent mortgage fraud attempt, but the pattern of financial exploitation dating back to my college years. Judge Anderson was assigned to this case as well, having familiarity with the circumstances. During the preliminary hearing, she made it clear that she took the allegations seriously. Financial abuse within families is particularly insidious because it exploits trust and emotional bonds, she stated during her opening remarks. This court intends to examine the full pattern of behavior described in the complaint. My parents' response was immediate and predictable. They hired a more aggressive attorney and filed motions to dismiss the case as frivolous. When that failed, they attempted to paint me as mentally unstable, suggesting that I had imaginary grievances against them stemming from delusional jealousy of my sister. The court saw through this tactic quickly, especially when Rachel presented the forged documents and credit card applications with my forged signatures from years earlier. We had obtained these records through subpoenas to the credit card companies, which showed accounts opened in my name while I was at college, with addresses matching my parents' home. What surprised me most was my parents' reaction as the evidence mounted against them. Rather than showing remorse or attempting to make amends, they became increasingly hostile. My father, usually so careful about his public image, lost his composure during his testimony. "We gave this ungrateful brat everything," he snapped when Rachel pressed him about the unauthorized credit cards. "We fed him, clothed him, put a roof over his head. Taking out a few cards to help with household expenses was the least he could do to repay us." The judge's expression darkened at this outburst. "Mister, are you suggesting that your minor child owed you financial compensation for fulfilling your legal obligation as a parent?" My father realized his mistake too late. "That's not what I meant." "Your Honor, then please clarify exactly what you did mean." The judge pressed. His subsequent attempts to backtrack only dug him deeper into a hole of admitting to the financial exploitation while trying to justify it. When the verdict finally came, it was more decisive than I had dared to hope. The court ruled in my favor on all counts. 1. My parents were ordered to pay $25,000 in damages for the emotional distress and professional impact of their actions. 2. They were required to reimburse me for all charges made on the fraudulent credit cards, opened during my college years, with interest, totaling just over $12,000. 3. A permanent restraining order was issued, preventing them from using my personal information for any financial purposes, with criminal penalties for violations. 4. They were ordered to pay all legal fees associated with both lawsuits. But most importantly, the judge included a formal referral to the State Bar Association regarding my father's ethical violations as an attorney, and a separate referral to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation of the forgery. The court takes a very dim view of using legal knowledge and professional standing to perpetrate fraud against one's own family. Judge Anderson stated in her closing remarks, "This behavior undermines the integrity of our legal system and the trust essential to family relationships." As the gavel came down, I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. It wasn't about the money. It was about finally having someone in authority acknowledge the wrong that had been done to me, about having my reality validated after years of gaslighting and manipulation. Outside the courthouse, my parents brushed past without looking at me, my mother dabbing at tears with a tissue for the benefit of anyone watching. My father's expression was stone, his back rigid with fury. Melanie had not attended this hearing, and I wondered if she even knew the full extent of what our parents had done. Rachel put a hand on my shoulder. "How do you feel?" "Validated," I said, "but also sad. I just lost my entire family." "No," she corrected gently. "You just freed yourself from people who were exploiting you. There's a difference." In the days that followed, my blog post about the lawsuit went viral. I had been updating it throughout the process, careful to focus on the legal and emotional aspects, rather than vengeful details about my family. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments and emails poured in from people sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. Many had never realized there was a name for what they were experiencing, or that they had legal recourse. Some had been supporting unemployed siblings or adult children for years out of guilt and obligation. Others had co-signed loans they couldn't afford under emotional duress. The pattern was disturbingly common. A financial rights nonprofit organization called Financial Boundaries reached out, asking if I would consider becoming an ambassador for their new campaign against family financial abuse. They wanted me to share my story at workshops and conferences, to help others recognize the warning signs and understand their rights. I agreed immediately. If my painful experience could help even one person avoid a similar situation, it would give some meaning to what I had endured. The first workshop I spoke at was small, just 20 people in a community center meeting room. I shared my story openly, from the childhood patterns of favoritism to the lawsuit and countersued. The room was silent when I finished, until an older woman in the back raised her hand. "I've been paying my son's mortgage for 7 years, she said, her voice trembling. "He told me it was just temporary, until his business took off. But he buys new cars and goes on vacations while I work 2 jobs at 64 years old. I never realized until now that what he's doing has a name. It's abuse." By the end of that session, 3 people had made appointments with the nonprofit's legal counsel to discuss their situations. I drove home that night with the first real sense of purpose I'd felt in months. 6 months after the court ruling, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. The most immediate change was professional. Despite my efforts to keep my personal drama separate from work, word had inevitably spread about the lawsuit. To my surprise, rather than being a liability, it became an asset. My company, a software firm with a strong ethical focus, viewed my stand against financial exploitation as a demonstration of integrity. When a senior developer position opened up, my supervisor recommended me without hesitation. "We value people who stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult," she told me during the promotion discussion. "The way you handled that situation showed character and principles." The promotion came with a substantial salary increase that eased the financial strain of the previous months. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. My relationship with my immediate family, however, was non-existent. My parents had not attempted to contact me since the court ruling. I had blocked their numbers and email addresses and instructed security at my building not to allow them entry if they ever showed up. As far as I knew, they were still living in their suburban home, still members of their country club, still maintaining the facade of the perfect family, just minus one son. Then, 3 months after the final court date, I received a text from an unknown number. "It's Melanie. Can we talk? Please don't block this number." After consulting with Rachel and my therapist, I agreed to meet my sister at a neutral public location, a coffee shop downtown. I arrived early and chose a table with a clear view of the door, my anxiety spiking despite months of therapy. When Melanie walked in, I barely recognized her. Her pregnancy was now clearly visible. But beyond that, she looked tired and drawn, in a way I had never seen before. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She was wearing simple maternity jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "Why did you want to see me?" She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, staring down at it rather than meeting my eyes. "I need to tell you something, Mom and Dad. They pressured me to say those things in court. They told me that if I didn't support their story, they would cut me off completely. With the baby coming, and Marcus." She trailed off, and I waited silently for her to continue. "Marcus left," she said finally, her voice small. "Right after we found out about the lawsuit being dismissed. He said he didn't sign up for family drama, and that he needed space. He's in California now with some startup. He sends a little money sometimes, but not enough." I felt a complicated mix of emotions: sympathy for my sister's situation, vindication that Marcus had finally revealed his true character, and lingering hurt from her betrayal. "I'm sorry about Marcus," I said, carefully. "But that doesn't explain why you lied about me in court." "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'm so sorry, Oakley. I was scared, and stupid, and selfish." After the second court case, Mom and Dad were furious. They blamed me for not being convincing enough. They said the house was my fault, that I should have done more to persuade you. She looked up finally, her eyes red-rimmed. They withdrew all support. They're selling the house they bought. I'm staying in a 1-bedroom apartment now, working as an administrative assistant at a dental office. It's the first real job I've had in years. The irony wasn't lost on me. Melanie was now living the kind of life I had been living for years, the very life our parents had considered beneath her. "What do you want from me, Melanie?" I asked directly. Nothing, she said quickly. Well, not nothing. Forgiveness, eventually, if that's possible. But mostly, I wanted you to know the truth. And to tell you that I'm going to be better for my baby and for myself. We talked for nearly 2 hours. It wasn't an instant reconciliation. Not by any means. The hurt was too deep. The trust too broken for that. But it was a beginning. I agreed to stay in contact, to potentially be part of my niece or nephew's life when they arrived. But I made it clear that my boundaries with our parents would remain firm. I understand, Melanie said. I'm starting to set boundaries with them too. It's hard, but I'm learning. As the months passed, my blog evolved into a full-fledged support platform. I organized financial rights workshops in partnership with the nonprofit, created resources for people dealing with family financial pressure, and connected readers with legal support when needed. Local newspapers picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about financial boundaries within families. I received invitations to speak at community colleges and universities about financial literacy and recognizing financial abuse. The dialogue around family obligation versus financial exploitation was finally happening in the open. Then came the email from a publisher. They had been following my blog and wanted to discuss a potential book deal. They envisioned a part memoir, part guidebook, aimed at helping others recognize and escape financially exploitative relationships. The advance they offered would allow me to take a sabbatical from my job to focus on writing and advocacy work. But the most surprising development came when I received a call from a detective with the White-Collar Crimes Division. The investigation sparked by Judge Anderson's referral had expanded beyond my case. Apparently, my parents had engaged in similar behavior with others, including clients of my father's law practice. The detective couldn't share details of an ongoing investigation, but wanted me to know that my coming forward had potentially protected others from exploitation. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights, reflecting on how completely my life had changed in less than a year. I had lost my family of origin, yes, but I had gained clarity, purpose, and a newfound sense of self-worth that no one could take from me. 1 year after that fateful family dinner, I moved to a new city for a fresh start. The book deal had been finalized, and I had purchased a modest but comfortable townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. It was the first place that truly felt like mine, decorated according to my taste rather than financial constraints or other people's expectations. My relationship with Melanie had slowly evolved into something new. Not the close siblings we had never really been, but not estranged either. She had given birth to a healthy baby girl named Lily, and I had cautiously stepped into the role of uncle. We met once a month, usually at a park or restaurant, carefully avoiding topics that might reopen old wounds. After much discussion and legal consultation, I had agreed to become the financial guardian for a small trust fund I had established for Lily. It wasn't a huge amount, just a portion of the settlement money from the lawsuit, but it would grow over time to help with her education. The key difference was that this was my choice, made freely without manipulation or coercion. The book had been published 6 months earlier and had become something of a sleeper hit in the self-help category. Financial boundaries. Protecting yourself from family exploitation wasn't topping any bestseller lists, but it had found its audience and was helping people. The letters and emails I received from readers who had found the courage to break free from financially abusive relationships made every painful moment of writing worth it. Through all of this, I had been working with a therapist named Dr. Karen, addressing not just the recent trauma of the lawsuit, but the childhood patterns that had made me vulnerable to exploitation in the first place. We had explored why I had constantly sought approval from parents who consistently withheld it, why I had accepted the role of family scapegoat for so long, and how I could build healthier relationships moving forward. Love doesn't mean self-sacrifice, Dr. Karen had told me during one particularly breakthrough session. Real love includes respect for boundaries. That simple statement had transformed my understanding of relationships. I began to evaluate all my connections through this new lens. Did this person respect my boundaries? Did they expect me to sacrifice my well-being for their comfort? Did they give as well as take? Some friendships didn't survive this scrutiny, particularly those where I had fallen into the role of perpetual giver. but others deepened, and new relationships formed on healthier foundations. One of these new relationships was with Jessica, a financial counselor I had met through my advocacy work. Our connection had started professionally as we collaborated on workshops, but gradually evolved into something more personal. What struck me most about Jessica was how naturally she respected boundaries, how she checked in before making assumptions, how she valued my perspective even when it differed from hers. 6 months into dating, we were taking things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from past relationships. But there was something profoundly healing about building a connection with someone who saw and valued me for exactly who I was, not for what I could provide or how I could be manipulated. My parents had made no attempt to contact me directly since the lawsuit. I had heard through Melanie that my father was facing an ethics investigation from the State Bar Association and that they had sold their large house and downsized significantly. I felt no satisfaction in their difficulties, just a sad acceptance that some relationships cannot be salvaged. Then, on the 1-year anniversary of the court verdict, a letter arrived at my new address, postmarked from my parents' city. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, and my heart raced as I held the unopened envelope. For several days, it sat on my kitchen counter while I debated whether to open it. Part of me was curious, another part fearful, and yet another part wanted to simply throw it away, unopened. Finally, I brought it to my next therapy session. You don't have to open it at all, Dr. Karen reminded me. And if you do decide to read it, you don't have to respond. The choice is entirely yours. That was the crux of it, really. The choice was mine. For so much of my life, I had been reacting to my family's demands, manipulations, and expectations. Now, I could choose my own path based on what was healthy for me. I still haven't decided whether to open that letter. It sits in my desk drawer, no longer causing anxiety, just waiting for the day when I feel ready, if that day ever comes. What I know now, with absolute clarity, is that family is not defined solely by blood. Family consists of the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, who support you without expecting payment in return. Some of us are fortunate enough to have that in our biological families. Others, like me, need to build it for ourselves. The wound of being sued by my own parents will always be part of my story. But it's no longer the defining chapter. It's simply one experience that helped shape me into who I am today. Someone who understands the value of boundaries, the importance of self-respect, and the power of choosing your own family. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect their financial well-being, even from family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true love never demands that you harm yourself to help others.